My name is Vivian, and at 35 years old, I thought I had the perfect life. A successful interior design business, a gorgeous home in Boston's most prestigious neighborhood, and 8 years of marriage to James, my investment banker husband. We had it all, or so I believed. That morning, as sunshine streamed through our kitchen windows, James looked up from his phone and, between bites of his favorite breakfast casserole, casually asked for a divorce. But that wasn't even the most shocking part of my day. If you're watching this, take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happened next. I met James at a charity gala in downtown Boston 10 years ago. I was there showcasing some of my interior design work for potential clients, and he was representing his investment firm as one of the event sponsors. James stood out immediately with his confident smile and tailored suit. When our eyes met across the room, I felt that movie moment connection people talk about, but I never believed existed. "That arrangement is stunning," he said, approaching my display of a modern living space I had designed. The balance between comfort and sophistication is exactly what I've been looking for in my new condo. What started as a conversation about design aesthetics turned into drinks at the bar, which led to dinner the following weekend. James was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my career and passions. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. He proposed during a surprise trip to Napa Valley, getting down on one knee in a vineyard at sunset. I was swept off my feet by the romance of it all. Our wedding took place the following spring at that same vineyard. 200 guests, a custom Vera Wang gown, and a reception that was featured in Boston Home magazine as the wedding of the season. We honeymooned in the Maldives for 2 weeks, staying in an overwater bungalow where we talked about our dreams for the future. Back then, we both agreed that children weren't part of our plan. We were career-focused and enjoyed our freedom to travel, work late, and build our professional reputations. After the wedding, my interior design business really took off. I secured contracts with several high-end real estate developers and even launched a small line of custom furniture. James was equally successful, receiving promotion after promotion at his firm. By our 3rd anniversary, he was managing major client portfolios and bringing home substantial bonuses. We purchased our dream home in Beacon Hill 2 years into our marriage, a historic brownstone that I spent months renovating to perfection. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with marble countertops, and a rooftop deck with views of the Charles River. I poured my heart into that house, selecting every finish, fabric, and fixture myself. It was my masterpiece, featured in Architectural Digest as an example of modern luxury with historic bones. Our social life revolved around charity events, gallery openings, and dinner parties with other successful couples. We took lavish vacations, twice a year, island hopping in Greece, wine tasting in France, and hiking in New Zealand. On Instagram, we were the couple others envied. The matching outfits at fundraisers, the candid shots of us laughing on exotic beaches, the professional Christmas cards sent to clients and friends. We looked perfect. But around our 5th anniversary, something shifted. James started working later hours, weekend calls became more frequent. Business trips extended from 2 days to 5. At first, I didn't think much of it. Success requires sacrifice, and I was busy with my own projects. Then I noticed other changes. James became protective of his phone, changing the password and turning it face down whenever I was nearby. He started taking calls in another room or on the balcony where I couldn't overhear. Our physical intimacy dwindled from several times a week to barely once a month, always, with an excuse about stress or exhaustion. I tried to address the growing distance between us. I planned surprise date nights, booked weekend getaways, and even attempted to spice things up in the bedroom. James would participate half-heartedly, his mind clearly elsewhere. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd dismiss my concerns with vague explanations about work pressure and difficult clients. During this time, my closest friend Sophia gently suggested that James might be having an affair. I rejected the idea immediately. James wasn't that type of man. We had built a life together. He wouldn't throw it all away for some fling. Besides, I reasoned we still had good moments. The occasional Sunday brunch, where he seemed present and engaged. The thoughtful birthday gift, though, I later realized his assistant had probably purchased it. The way he still kissed me goodbye each morning, even if it felt increasingly routine. As our 7th anniversary approached, I began to question our decision to remain childless. Something about the emptiness of our beautiful home started to bother me. I broached the subject with James one evening over dinner, suggesting that perhaps we should reconsider starting a family. His reaction was unexpectedly harsh. "We agreed on this years ago, Vivian. Don't change the rules now. My career is at a critical point, and I can't handle a child disrupting our lives." The conversation ended there, but it left me wondering if we truly wanted the same things anymore. Still, I pushed my doubts aside and focused on my growing business. I took on more clients, expanded my team, and channeled my nurturing instincts into mentoring young designers instead of raising children. As I approached my 35th birthday, I noticed more gray hairs and fine lines appearing in the mirror. The biological clock I had long ignored seemed to tick louder each day. Meanwhile, James, at 38, only seemed to grow more attractive with age. The silver at his temples gave him a distinguished look that turned heads at every event we attended. I wondered if he noticed the way younger women looked at him, or worse, if he reciprocated their interest. Despite the growing distance between us, I still believed we could find our way back to each other. I was determined to make our marriage work, convinced that what we had built together was worth fighting for. I had no idea how completely I had been deceived, or how quickly my perfect life was about to unravel over a single breakfast. I woke up early that Thursday morning, determined to create the perfect opportunity to talk with James about our relationship. The night before, he had come home after midnight again, slipping into bed without so much as a whispered goodnight. I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering who he had been with and what was happening to us. As the first light of dawn filtered through our bedroom curtains, I carefully slid out of bed, leaving James sleeping. In the kitchen, I began preparing his favorite breakfast, a spinach and Gruyere casserole with sourdough toast and freshly squeezed orange juice. The familiar routine of chopping vegetables and whisking eggs calmed my nerves as I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I needed to be direct, but not accusatory. I would express my feelings without placing blame. I would suggest marriage counseling as a way for us to reconnect and rebuild what we once had. I practiced the words in my head as the casserole baked, filling our kitchen with a warm, inviting aroma. At precisely 7:30, James appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a charcoal suit and burgundy tie. His hair was perfectly styled, and he smelled of expensive cologne. He looked surprised to see me standing there, already dressed myself in a casual but elegant outfit I knew he liked. "What's all this?" he asked, glancing at the elaborate breakfast laid out on our kitchen island. "I thought we could enjoy breakfast together for once," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. It's been a while since we've had a morning without rushing out the door. James checked his watch and frowned. "I have an early meeting, but I suppose I can spare 15 minutes. He sat at the island, immediately pulling out his phone and scrolling through emails while I served the food. The distance between us felt vast, despite being separated by just a few feet of marble countertop. "This looks good," he said without looking up from his screen. I took a deep breath and placed my hand on his arm. "James, I was hoping we could talk about us. I feel like we've been drifting apart lately, and I want to find a way back to what we had." He finally put his phone down, but instead of the concerned expression I expected, his face was impassive, almost cold. "Actually, Vivian, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you, too." He took a sip of orange juice and set the glass down with deliberate precision. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "What? A divorce," he repeated, cutting a perfect square of casserole with his fork. "I think it's for the best. We've grown apart, and I want different things now." "Different things?" I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. "What different things? We can work through this, James. Couples go through rough patches all the time." And he chewed slowly, swallowed, and then looked at me with detachment that made my stomach clench. "I don't think that's possible anymore. I've given this a lot of thought, and my mind is made up." "Just like that over breakfast." My shock was turning to anger. 8 years of marriage, and you drop this bomb while eating the food I just made for you. He sighed, looking annoyed. "I don't see the point in dragging it out. Clean break, fresh start." "Fresh start?" My voice was rising now. "What about counseling? What about trying to save what we built together? Don't I deserve at least that much effort?" "Counseling won't change how I feel," he said flatly. "I've been unhappy for a long time, Vivian. We want different things in life." "You keep saying that, but what exactly do you want that I haven't given you?" Tears were forming in my eyes, but I fought to hold them back. James pushed his plate away, barely half-eaten. "Look, I didn't want to get into specifics and make this harder than it needs to be. Can't we just agree that this isn't working and move forward civilly?" "No, we can't. You owe me an explanation after 8 years." The tears were falling freely now. "Is there someone else? Just tell me the truth." His jaw tightened. "This isn't about anyone else. It's about us not being right for each other anymore." "That's bullshit, James. And you know it. Something changed. Someone changed you." I was fully crying now. My breakfast untouched, my hands shaking. He stood up, straightening his tie. "This is exactly why I wanted to keep it simple. The dramatics don't help anything, Vivian." "Dramatics?" I nearly shouted. "My husband just asked for a divorce over breakfast without any warning. How am I supposed to react?" "I need to go to work," he said, reaching for his suit jacket draped over a nearby chair. "We can discuss logistics later when you're calmer. Don't you dare walk out that door." I stood up, blocking his path. "We are having this conversation now. You at least owe me that much respect." His face hardened. "I don't owe you anything." And frankly, this reaction is exactly why I've been putting off telling you. I knew you'd make it into a scene. I was about to respond when the doorbell rang, cutting through our argument like a knife. We both froze, staring at each other. "Are you expecting someone?" James asked, a flicker of something I couldn't identify crossing his face. At 8 a.m. during our divorce discussion. No, James. My social calendar is surprisingly clear. The sarcasm dripped from my voice as I moved toward the door, wiping tears from my cheeks. I had no idea that answering that doorbell would completely change the course of not just my morning, but my entire life. I opened our front door to find a young woman standing on the porch. She was petite, with long brown hair and delicate features. She was also unmistakably pregnant, her belly protruding prominently under a floral maternity dress. I guess she was in her mid-20s and about 7 months along. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to compose myself despite my tear-stained face. She looked slightly confused. "I'm looking for James Montgomery. This is his address, right?" My stomach dropped. "Yes, he lives here. I'm his wife, Vivian." The color drained from her face. "His wife? But that's not... He said he was divorced." Before I could respond, I heard James's voice behind me. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" I turned to see my husband standing in the hallway, his face a mask of panic and shock. The look they exchanged told me everything I needed to know. "You know her," I said. It wasn't a question. The woman Amanda stepped back, her hand instinctively moving to protect her pregnant belly. "James, you told me you were divorced. You said your ex-wife moved to California months ago." I laughed bitterly. "Well, I'm very much still his wife, and as you can see, I'm still in Boston." "Amanda, you shouldn't be here," James said, pushing past me to step onto the porch. "We agreed you wouldn't come to my home." "Your home," I repeated incredulously. "You mean our home, the home I designed and decorated while you were apparently starting a second family?" Amanda's eyes widened. "Second family? James, what is going on?" She looked directly at me. "I swear to you, I had no idea he was still married. He told me he had been divorced for over a year when we met." "Please come in," I said to Amanda, stepping aside. "I think we all need to have a conversation." "Vivian, this isn't necessary," James protested, but Amanda was already walking past him into our living room. "Actually, James, I think it's long overdue," I replied coldly. Once in the living room, Amanda perched uncertainly on the edge of our sofa, looking around at the photos of James and me that still adorned the walls and shelves. James remained standing, his body language tense and defensive. "So," I said, sitting across from Amanda, "how long have you known my husband?" "Almost a year," she answered, her voice small. "We met at a coffee shop near the financial district. He said he was divorced, that his marriage had ended because his wife didn't want children. And he did." I felt like I'd been slapped. "He said I didn't want children. That's why we divorced in his fictional version of events." Amanda nodded, then turned to James. "You told me you had your own apartment. Is that even true? Or was that a lie too?" James ran a hand through his hair. "I do have an apartment. In Seaport." "You have another apartment." This was news to me. "How long have you had it?" "About 18 months, he admitted reluctantly. My mind raced, calculating. So you've been planning this for a year and a half, living a double life while we were still supposedly happily married. It wasn't like that, James said defensively. I needed space to think. To think? Amanda interrupted. You told me it was our place. You said you bought it for us to start our family. I looked at her swollen belly. And I'm guessing that's his baby. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Yes, I'm 7 months pregnant. James has been coming to all my doctor's appointments. He even helped me pick out nursery furniture last weekend. I felt physically ill. While I had been at home wondering why my husband was working late, he had been shopping for baby furniture with his pregnant girlfriend. James, were you planning to tell me about any of this? Or were you just going to divorce me and pretend your new family magically appeared fully formed? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. I was going to tell you after the divorce was finalized. I didn't want to hurt you unnecessarily. Hurt me unnecessarily? My voice rose. As opposed to the necessary hurt of betraying our marriage vows, lying to me for years, and starting a family with another woman behind my back. I didn't plan for any of this to happen, he said lamely. Amanda was openly crying now. I came here today because you've been dodging my calls about the birth plan. I wanted to surprise you and show you the ultrasound pictures from yesterday's appointment. She pulled an envelope from her purse and threw it on the coffee table. I had no idea I was the other woman. You weren't the other woman, James said quickly. Vivian and I were already having problems. Were we? I asked. Because I was under the impression we were working through a rough patch. I had no idea we were so broken that you needed to create an entirely separate life. I tried to tell you I was unhappy, he argued, when between business trips that were obviously visits to your secret apartment, or during the endless work calls that were probably with Amanda. Amanda wiped her tears and looked at James with new clarity in her eyes. James, am I the only one? Have you been honest with me about anything? The way he averted his gaze answered her question before his words could. Oh my God, she whispered. Amanda, it's complicated, he began. Is there anyone else besides us? I demanded. His silence was damning. In that moment, looking at his cornered expression, I realized that I was sitting across from a stranger. The man I had loved and trusted for a decade was a fiction. In his place stood someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of sustained deception on a scale I could barely comprehend. And as I exchanged glances with Amanda, I saw my own shock and betrayal mirrored in her eyes. We were both victims of the same elaborate lie, connected now by the painful truth that was spilling out, leaving the man between us exposed and humiliated. The silence that followed James's non-answer was deafening. Amanda and I both stared at him, waiting for an explanation that could somehow make sense of the wreckage he had created. Instead, he reached for his phone, a reflex action I had seen countless times before. But this time, Amanda spoke up. "Show us your phone, James," she said, her voice steadier than I expected. "What?" "No," he responded, clutching it tighter. "If there's nothing else to hide, let us see it." I added, surprising myself with how calm I sounded, despite the rage and hurt churning inside me. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to prove anything to either of you," he said, but his defensive tone only confirmed our suspicions. Amanda reached into her purse and pulled out her own phone. "Fine, then I'll show Vivian what you've been telling me." She turned to me. "James promised me months ago that he was going to tell his ex-wife about us. About the baby. She scrolled through her messages and handed me her phone. I read the text from James dated 3 months earlier. Told my ex about us today. She took it hard, but we'll be fine. Now we can finally be together openly. Can't wait to meet my son. Lawyer says divorce will be finalized in 60 days. Everything's on track for us to be a family before the baby comes. Just put the last of my things in storage. Clean break. Fresh start with you and our little guy. Each message was like a knife twisting in my gut. While I had been planning date nights and trying to save our marriage, James had been actively constructing an elaborate fiction for Amanda, making promises he had no intention of keeping on the timeline he described. "These are from March," I said, my voice hollow. "We went to your sister's wedding together in April. You introduced me as your wife to your new colleagues." Amanda's expression hardened. "So you were playing house with me while still married to her, taking me to doctor's appointments while attending family events with your wife." James reached for his phone again, this time to check the time. "I have a client meeting at 9. We need to table this discussion until later." "You're not going anywhere," I said firmly. "Not until we get the full truth." "There's more," Amanda said, taking her phone back and continuing to scroll. "Last month, I found receipts in his jacket for jewelry I never received. When I asked about it, he said it was a surprise for my birthday. My birthday was 2 weeks ago, and there was no jewelry." Something clicked in my mind. I walked to the small desk in the corner of our living room and pulled out a stack of financial statements I had been organizing for tax purposes. James had always insisted on handling our finances, but I had recently taken over some of the paperwork to ease his work stress. I quickly found what I was looking for: credit card statements showing charges at Tiffany's, Gucci, and several high-end restaurants I had never been to. There were hotel charges in New York and Chicago during weeks when James had told me he was at conferences in those cities, but the hotel names didn't match the conference venues he had mentioned. "You've been taking money from our joint accounts to fund your other life," I said, flipping through the statements. "There are thousands of dollars here spent on things I know nothing about." "Those are business expenses," James protested weakly. "Business expenses at Victoria's Secret, at a jewelry store on Valentine's Day, when you gave me a card and claimed you were too busy to shop." My voice was rising again. "Who was the recipient, James?" "Amanda, or someone else?" Amanda stood up suddenly, her hand on her belly. "There are others, aren't there? That's why you've been canceling our plans last minute. That's why you sometimes don't answer your phone for hours." James remained silent, but his eyes darted between us, calculating his best escape route. "I think your silence tells us everything we need to know," I said coldly. Amanda turned to me. "2 weeks ago, James missed our Lamaze class. He said he had an emergency with a client. When I called his office to leave a message, his assistant said he had left early for a dinner with colleagues." "Let me guess," I said. "No client emergency, no office dinner." She nodded. "I drove by his apartment that night and he wasn't there. His car was gone." I laughed bitterly. "So he was with neither his wife nor his pregnant girlfriend. The plot thickens." James finally spoke. "You're both blowing this out of proportion." "Are we?" I challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, you've been living at least 3 separate lives. One with me, one with Amanda, and God knows how many others." I turned to Amanda. "Has he mentioned colleagues named Sarah or Melissa?" Her face paled. "He said Sarah is his assistant and Melissa is a client. Why?" "Because there are multiple calls to both women on our phone bill, often late at night when he claimed to be working." I'd noticed the names recurring, but had dismissed my concerns, trusting James's explanations. "This is all circumstantial," James said, attempting to regain control of the situation. "You're creating conspiracy theories based on phone calls and receipts." "Then explain it," Amanda challenged. "Explain all of it right now." Instead of answering, James changed tactics. "Vivian, you've been so focused on your career that you barely had time for our marriage. And Amanda, you knew from the beginning that I had complications in my personal life. I was trying to make everyone happy while figuring things out. Don't you dare turn this around on us," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You weren't figuring things out. You were systematically deceiving everyone while taking what you wanted from each relationship." Amanda nodded in agreement, then turned to me with unexpected compassion. "I truly had no idea about you, Vivian. If I had known he was still married, I never would have gotten involved with him." In that moment, I believed her. She looked as devastated as I felt, perhaps even more so given her pregnancy. "I know," I said. "We're both victims here." James scoffed. "Victims? That's dramatic. We're all adults who made choices." "The difference," I replied, "is that we made choices based on the truth as we understood it. You made choices based on lies you carefully constructed." As we continued comparing notes, a clearer picture emerged of the man we thought we knew. James had been dating multiple women throughout our marriage, creating elaborate backstories to keep each relationship compartmentalized. Amanda had only become a more permanent fixture when she unexpectedly became pregnant, forcing James to make promises he likely never intended to keep. While we talked, James made another attempt to leave, heading for the door. But when he stepped outside, he discovered his car was blocked in the driveway by Amanda's vehicle. "Move your car," he demanded through the open door. "No," she replied simply. "Not until we're done here." His face reddened with humiliation and rage as he realized he was trapped, not just physically, but by the truth that was finally catching up to him. After the initial shock wore off, a strange calm descended over me. I stood up from the sofa and walked to the front door, closing it firmly, with James still outside on the porch. "What are you doing?" I heard him call through the door as I turned the deadbolt. "Taking control of my life," I replied loud enough for him to hear. Then I turned to Amanda, who was still sitting in my living room looking shell-shocked. "Would you like some tea? This might take a while." She nodded gratefully, and I headed to the kitchen, ignoring James's increasingly angry knocks and calls from outside. I needed space to think, to process, to decide my next steps without his manipulative presence. As I prepared 2 cups of chamomile tea, I heard James's voice shift from angry to pleading. "Vivian, please, this isn't how adults handle situations. Let me in so we can talk reasonably." "We'll talk when I'm ready," I called back. "Until then, you can wait outside or leave, your choice." I returned to the living room with the tea and handed a cup to Amanda. "Are you okay? This must be especially stressful in your condition." She accepted the tea with trembling hands. "I'm just trying to process it all. I feel so stupid." "Don't," I said firmly. "James is clearly an expert at deception. We both believed what he wanted us to believe." James continued knocking for several more minutes before his phone rang. I heard him answer it, outside, his voice shifting to the professional tone I knew so well. After a brief conversation, he called through the door again. "I have to go to the office. This client meeting is crucial. We'll continue this discussion tonight." Neither Amanda nor I responded, and eventually we heard him ask Amanda to move her car. Through the front window, I watched her reluctantly go outside, exchange a few tense words with James, and then move her vehicle. James got into his BMW and drove away without a backward glance. Once he was gone, Amanda returned and collapsed back onto the sofa. I can't believe this is happening. I'm due in 2 months, and the father of my child is a complete stranger. How did you meet him? I asked, genuinely curious about how James had managed this deception. At a coffee shop near Copley Square, she explained. I was working on my laptop and he asked if he could share my table since the place was packed. He was charming, well-dressed, obviously successful. She sighed. He told me he was recently divorced, that his ex-wife had moved to California to pursue her career after their split. He seemed so sad about it, said he had wanted children but she hadn't. The irony was painful. He told me this morning that he wanted a divorce because we'd grown apart and wanted different things. Yet he never once mentioned wanting children during our recent conversations. And in fact, when I broached the subject last year, he shut it down immediately. He took me to an apartment in Seaport for our 3rd date, Amanda continued. Said he had just finished furnishing it after the divorce. It was beautiful, but kind of impersonal, you know. Not many photos or personal items. He explained that away by saying he wanted a fresh start without reminders. I nodded, the pieces falling into place. The business trips, the late nights, the weekend conferences. He was juggling multiple lives. What are you going to do? Amanda asked softly. I took a deep breath. First, I'm calling a locksmith to change the locks. Then, I'm contacting a divorce attorney. What about you? I don't know, she admitted, rubbing her belly absently. I need to protect my baby, but I don't want anything to do with James anymore. An unexpected sense of solidarity formed between us in that moment. We were both victims of the same man's elaborate deception, both facing uncertain futures because of his selfishness. Stay here while I make some calls, I suggested. You shouldn't be alone right now. The locksmith arrived within the hour, quickly changing all the exterior locks on the house. I paid him extra to change the security system code as well. Meanwhile, I contacted the top 3 divorce attorneys in Boston, scheduling consultations with each for the following day. I wanted the best representation possible. While I was on the phone with the last attorney, Amanda gasped from the living room. I rushed in to find her staring at her phone. What is it? I was curious, so I searched James's name along with the word married on social media, she explained, turning her screen toward me. Look what I found. It was a post from 6 months ago on a private Boston community forum. A woman warning others about a man named James Montgomery, who preyed on professional women claiming to be divorced when he was actually married. The post had been removed quickly, but Amanda had found a screenshot someone had saved. There are others, I said, my suspicions confirmed. Probably many others. The more we searched, the more evidence we uncovered. James had been living multiple lives for years, not just the 18 months he had admitted to. There were hints of relationships with at least 3 other women that we could find online, plus the mysterious Sarah and Melissa from our phone records. As afternoon turned to evening, I helped Amanda gather her things. She had decided to stay with her sister for a few days while processing everything. I'll text you what I find out from the lawyers tomorrow, I promised as she headed to the door. We should stay in touch. James needs to be held accountable, especially with a child involved. She nodded, looking both exhausted and determined. Thank you, Vivian, for being kind when you had every right to hate me. "This isn't your fault," I assured her. "We're both collateral damage in James's self-centered world." After Amanda left, I sat alone in the house that had once represented my perfect life. Now it felt tainted, full of memories I couldn't trust. I methodically went through James's closet, packing his clothes into suitcases and boxes. Whatever didn't fit, I left on the bed. He could figure it out himself. By midnight, James still hadn't returned or called. I imagined him discovering his key no longer worked. Perhaps sleeping in his secret apartment, or more likely with yet another woman who had no idea who he really was. The thought that should have devastated me instead steeled my resolve. I took a sleeping pill and crawled into the guest bedroom, unable to face sleeping in our marital bed. As I drifted off, I made a promise to myself this would be the first and last night I would cry over James Montgomery. Tomorrow would be about rebuilding my life on my terms. The 3 months following that fateful breakfast were a blur of legal meetings, emotional processing, and gradual rebuilding. The morning after James's double life was exposed, he arrived at the house to find his key didn't work. When I finally answered his angry pounding, 2 suitcases packed with his clothes sat in the foyer. "You can't just lock me out of my own house," he fumed, trying to push past me. "Actually, I can. I've filed for a temporary restraining order based on emotional abuse and financial exploitation. My attorney will contact yours. Until then, stay away from me and this house." His face registered shock, then anger. "You're overreacting. We can work this out privately." "Like you worked things out with Amanda or Sarah or Melissa?" I asked calmly. "There's nothing to work out, James, just divorce papers to sign." "I'll fight you on the house," he threatened. "Half of everything is legally mine." I smiled thinly. "You might want to consult with your attorney before making threats. Adultery and financial deception don't play well in court. Neither does hiding assets, which I know you've been doing based on the bank statements I found." His expression confirmed I had hit the mark. I had discovered transfers to accounts I knew nothing about, likely his preparation for the divorce he had been planning. "Take your things and go," I said, stepping back to allow him to collect the suitcases. "The rest is boxed up in the garage. You have 1 hour to get it before I donate it all." That first confrontation set the tone for our separation. James alternated between threats, manipulation, and occasional attempts at reconciliation, none of which moved me. I had seen behind the curtain and could never unsee the truth of who he really was. My divorce attorney, Victoria Sanderson, was worth every penny of her exorbitant fee. She was ruthless in pursuit of justice, uncovering even more financial deception than I had initially found. James had been siphoning money from our joint accounts into private investments and a secret savings account for over 2 years. He was preparing for this divorce long before he asked for it, Victoria explained during one of our meetings. But his mistake was getting sloppy with the documentation. We have everything we need to push for a favorable settlement. I threw myself into work during this period, taking on new clients and projects that required intense focus. Interior design became my therapy, creating beautiful spaces for others, while my own life was in disarray. My business actually thrived during this time, perhaps because I channeled all my emotions into my work. Surprisingly, I maintained contact with Amanda. We developed an unlikely friendship born from shared betrayal. She kept me updated on her pregnancy, and I attended a doctor's appointment with her when James failed to show up. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I was there for the birth of James's child while he was nowhere to be found. He texted saying he had an emergency at work, Amanda told me, as we sat in the waiting room. I didn't bother responding. Has he been providing any financial support? I asked. She shook her head. He deposited money once, but nothing since I told him I was filing for formal child support through the courts. Smart move, I said. My attorney can connect you with someone who specializes in paternity and child support cases. As we navigated our separate legal battles with James, information continued to surface about his other relationships. Through social media and mutual connections, we identified at least 4 other women he had been seeing during our marriage. 2 reached out to me directly after hearing rumors of our separation. Lisa, a pharmaceutical sales rep, had been dating James for nearly a year, believing he was a widower. He showed me a picture of a woman he said was his late wife said she died of cancer 3 years ago. She told me over coffee. He even took me to a grave in Mount Auburn Cemetery once, though thinking back I never clearly saw the name on the headstone. Natalie, a financial analyst at a competing firm, had a similar story. James told me he was divorced and shared custody of a son, who lived primarily with his ex-wife in Chicago. He would cancel dates claiming it was his weekend with his son. There is no son, is there? No, I confirmed. No children at all. At least not until Amanda's baby arrives. The more we learned, the clearer it became that James was a pathological liar who had constructed elaborate fictional narratives to maintain multiple relationships simultaneously. What was most disturbing was how methodical he had been creating backstories tailored to each woman's sympathies and keeping meticulous track of his lies. Throughout this period, James's family reached out to me, expressing shock and dismay at his behavior. His sister Catherine, with whom I had always been close, called me in tears. I had no idea, Vivian. None of us did. Mom is devastated, and Dad can barely speak about it. This isn't how they raised him. I know, I assured her. This isn't a reflection on your family. James made his choices. Are you doing okay? She asked. We all love you and want to support you through this. Her kindness nearly broke the emotional dam I had carefully constructed. I'm taking it day by day, I admitted. Some moments are harder than others. Catherine insisted on maintaining our relationship despite the divorce proceedings. You're still my sister, papers or not, she declared. Her loyalty was a bright spot in an otherwise dark time. The initial court hearings revealed even more about James's deception. Financial records showed he had been preparing for divorce for over 2 years, gradually moving assets and establishing his separate life. His attorney attempted to argue for an equal division of property despite the infidelity, but the evidence of financial misconduct weakened their position considerably. During one particularly tense hearing, James's carefully crafted professional image began to crumble. A former colleague testified about inappropriate relationships with clients and coworkers, painting a picture of a man who regularly abused his position of power. Shortly after, rumors circulated that James was being investigated by his firm for ethical violations related to client relationships. By the 3-month mark, James's life was unraveling publicly and professionally. The man who had once been considered a rising star was now viewed with suspicion and disdain. Several clients requested transfers to other advisors, and his firm placed him on administrative leave pending their internal investigation. I took no pleasure in his downfall, but I couldn't deny the validation it provided. The mask had finally slipped, revealing the true face beneath to everyone, not just to me and Amanda. As summer turned to fall, I found myself breathing easier, sleeping better, and even occasionally laughing again. The divorce was far from finalized, but I had reclaimed my sense of self. The woman who had sobbed at her kitchen island while her husband casually asked for a divorce was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and increasingly at peace with the new direction of her life. One evening, as I sat on my rooftop deck watching the sunset over the Charles River, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. It's a boy, 7 LBs, 8 O's, healthy and perfect. James nowhere to be found, but honestly, I'm relieved. Thank you for your support these past months. Would love for you to meet him when we're settled. I smiled at my phone, feeling an unexpected warmth. From the ashes of betrayal, something genuine had emerged. A friendship that neither of us could have anticipated on that devastating morning when our worlds collided. 1 year after that life-changing breakfast, I stood in my redesigned living room and marveled at how much had changed. The walls, once cream, were now a confident blue-gray. The furniture had been rearranged to create conversation areas rather than the formal showpiece layout James had preferred. Family photos had been replaced with abstract art and landscapes that spoke to me on a deeper level. The house finally felt like mine, alone. The divorce had been finalized 4 months earlier, with terms heavily in my favor. James's multiple infidelities, financial deceptions, and deteriorating professional reputation had left him with little leverage in negotiations. I kept the house, received substantial alimony, and maintained full ownership of my business. James was left with his secret apartment, rapidly dwindling savings, and the consequences of his actions. My interior design business had not just survived the personal upheaval, but thrived. The divorce had inadvertently become a networking opportunity, as several of James's former colleagues and their spouses sought me out for projects, perhaps as a show of solidarity. I had expanded my team to include 3 junior designers and an office manager, allowing me to take on larger commercial projects while maintaining my residential client base. On this particular Saturday morning, as spring sunlight streamed through newly installed skylights, I was preparing for a special visitor. Amanda and her now 6-month-old son, Noah, were coming for brunch. Our unlikely friendship had deepened over the past year, strengthened by shared experience and mutual respect. When the doorbell rang, I felt none of the dread that had accompanied that sound a year ago. Instead, I opened the door to find Amanda, looking radiant. Baby Noah perched on her hip, his curious eyes taking in everything around him. "The house looks amazing," Amanda said as she stepped inside. "I barely recognize it." "That was the goal," I replied, reaching for Noah. "May I?" She handed him over, and I cradled the baby against my chest. He had James's eyes, but Amanda's gentle smile. Looking at him, I felt no resentment, only a strange sense of wonder at how life unfolds in unexpected ways. "How's the new apartment?" I asked as we moved to the kitchen where brunch was waiting. "Perfect for us," Amanda replied. "The school district is excellent, which is important now that I'm thinking long-term. And the child support finally started coming regularly after the court mandated automatic withdrawals from James's accounts." Has he been involved at all? I placed Noah in the portable high chair Amanda had brought. She shook her head. He came to the hospital the day after Noah was born, stayed for exactly 20 minutes, took a picture with him and left. Since then, it's been sporadic texts asking for photos, but no actual visits. I think he's relieved I'm not pushing for more involvement. His loss, I said, looking at Noah's cheerful face. This little guy is wonderful. As we enjoyed our meal, Amanda updated me on her life. She had returned to her job as a graphic designer, found excellent childcare, and was slowly dating again, though with much more caution than before. "What about you?" she asked. "I saw you mentioned in Boston Magazine's Women to Watch feature. Your career is really taking off." I smiled. It's been an unexpected silver lining. Without James, I've been able to focus completely on my vision for the business. No compromises, no explanations for late nights at the design studio. And personally, she probed gently, I've been seeing someone, I admitted. Very casually, very slowly. Michael is an architect I collaborated with on the Beacon Street commercial project. We're taking our time getting to know each other as friends first. That's wonderful, Vivian. You deserve happiness. The conversation shifted to James, as it inevitably did when we got together. Neither of us followed his life closely anymore, but news occasionally reached us through mutual connections. Catherine told me he was asked to resign from the firm I shared. Apparently, the internal investigation found multiple violations of company policy regarding client relationships. Amanda nodded. I heard he's working for a much smaller firm now with a significant pay cut. His apartment in Seaport is on the market. The mighty fall, I mused, but without malice. Have you heard about Sarah? The assistant. No, what about her? She filed a sexual harassment claim against him. It was settled out of court, but it further damaged his professional reputation. We shared these updates not with glee, but with a sense of justice being served. James was facing the natural consequences of his actions, and while we had both moved on, there was some comfort in knowing the universe had its own way of balancing scales. After brunch, as Amanda prepared to leave with a sleepy Noah, she paused at the door. You know, as horrible as that morning was a year ago, I'm grateful we found each other. Having you in my life during this journey has been unexpected, but so valuable. I hugged her carefully, mindful of the baby between us. I feel the same way. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best connections. After they left, I wandered through my home, reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed in just 1 year. The woman who had prepared breakfast for her husband that morning had been living in a beautiful illusion, desperately trying to save a marriage that had been broken for years without her knowledge. She had defined herself partly through her role as a wife, measuring her success by the stability of her relationship. The woman I had become was standing firmly on her own rebuilt, from the ground up like one of my design projects. The foundation was stronger now, the structure more authentic, the details more genuinely reflective of who I truly was. 6 months after the divorce, James had attempted to reconnect. He appeared at my office one evening as I was leaving, looking noticeably less polished than during our marriage. His expensive watch was gone, replaced by something more modest. His suit, while still tailored, lacked the designer quality I was accustomed to seeing him in. "Vivian," he had said, stepping forward, "you look wonderful." "What do you want, James?" I had asked, keys clutched in my hand, ready to leave. I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of therapy too. He attempted a self-deprecating smile that once would have charmed me. I made terrible mistakes, the worst mistakes of my life. I took you for granted, betrayed your trust, hurt you in ways I can never fully make right. Is there a point to this? I miss you, he admitted. I miss us. What we had was real, at least in the beginning. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I wondered if we could just have coffee sometime. Talk. Maybe start a new chapter. I had studied him for a moment, searching for any flicker of the feelings that had once consumed me. There was nothing but a distant recognition, like looking at a photograph of a place you visited long ago. No, James, I said finally. What we had wasn't real because it wasn't based on truth. You weren't honest about who you were, and I was in love with a version of you that didn't exist. I wish you well with your therapy, but there's no going back for us. He had looked genuinely disappointed, perhaps even hurt. Can you ever forgive me? The question had made me pause. Forgiveness isn't about you, James. It's about me refusing to carry the weight of what you did any longer. So yes, I forgive you, but not for your sake, for mine. And forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I had walked away then feeling lighter with each step, knowing it was truly the end of that chapter of my life. Now, a year after the breakfast that had shattered my world, I was considering possibilities I had never imagined during my marriage. I was researching adoption and foster care, contemplating motherhood on my own terms. I had joined the board of a women's shelter, using my design skills to create safe healing spaces for those escaping abusive relationships. I was planning a solo trip to Portugal, something James had always vetoed in favor of more prestigious destinations. As I stood on my rooftop deck that evening, watching the sun set over Boston, I thought about the strange twists and turns that had brought me to this moment. The breakfast that was meant to end my life as I knew it had instead been the first meal of my new beginning. The husband who had betrayed me had inadvertently set me free. The pregnant mistress who should have been my enemy had become a valued friend. Life rarely unfolds as we expect, and relationships seldom survive exactly as they begin. The true measure of our character lies not in avoiding pain, but in how we rebuild after devastation. In the rebuilding, I had discovered parts of myself that had been dormant during my marriage. Strength, resilience, and a capacity for joy that was entirely my own, not dependent on anyone else's presence or approval. The breakfast table where James had casually destroyed our marriage was gone now, replaced by a handcrafted piece I had commissioned from a local artisan. It represented my philosophy going forward. Build beautiful things from raw materials, appreciate the imperfections that give character, and create space for nourishment and connection that is authentic and true. If you've stayed with me through this story, I hope you take away one thing: betrayal may break you temporarily, but it doesn't define you permanently. The broken pieces can be reassembled into something stronger and more beautiful than before. Trust your instincts, honor your worth, and remember that sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most authentic beginnings. Have you ever experienced a moment that seemed devastating, but ultimately led to positive change in your life? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that there is life after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey from brokenness to rebuilding, and I wish you strength on whatever path you're traveling.